Good times, bad times, hard times, you know. They went through a lot together.
But her and my dad made this trust, and my mother thought it was set. It was going to be okay.
Jamie's mother passed away in August 2000, leaving behind her stepfather, Jack, who she regards as her father.
He was always my rescuer.
But when Jack's mental and physical abilities started declining, as trustee, Jamie knew it was time for her to become the rescuer. So she sought legal help.
I didn't know what a trustee was supposed to be doing. That's why I hired them.
She said her attorneys immediately began recommending that she hire a fiduciary.
Every time I was around him, it was give it to a private fiduciary.
Over a month later, Jamie decided to abide by her attorney's advice and relinquished her role as trustee, as well as granted a conservatorship of her father to a fiduciary they recommended named Carolyn Young.
They told me when Carolyn Young became the conservator, she takes care of everything with Jack.
It's a similar story for Catherine.
My dad's attorney, Todd Roby, was trying to suggest to my dad that maybe they hire this woman, Carolyn Young, to help them with their finances.
While Catherine's story is different, it ended in the same way Jamie's did, with her parent being placed under a conservatorship. And despite this occurring 5 years ago, with her mother passing away in 2016, she's still in litigation. Because of this, she requested we not use her last name. Catherine says her father appointed one of their caregivers to serve as co-trustee because they considered them family.
I was not living here. That was really my dad's big concern of kind of like making sure that my mom's caregivers would not leave her.
The other trustee was their granddaughter, who was age 25. Catherine said her father's attorney encouraged both trustees to enact a conservatorship.
The odd thing is that this could still take place when my mother was against it, my brother, myself, so direct relatives more so. And that's just the court system.
Catherine says for the 4 years the conservatorship was in place, Young saw her mother a total of 3 times. We asked Young about Catherine's claim. She responded in part saying she could not speak to this specific case as these matters are confidential, but generally speaking, conservatees are seen once a month by herself or her staff. In our previous episode, we showed you how family disagreements can often lead to conservatorships. But another common way conservatorships are instated is through the recommendation of attorneys.
I do have my favorite fiduciaries, but they're my favorites because I think they actually look out for the client.
But some are concerned about fiduciaries that look out for themselves and those who work with them rather than the client. It's a pattern we found in documents from the Professional Fiduciary Bureau. For example, fiduciary Richard Cox in Plumas County purchased shares with funds from clients' trusts in a company he owned. And fiduciary Sally Cicerone in Orange County paid herself over $14,000 and paid over $28,000 to her attorney from a client's trust fund after she had been removed as trustee. Not following the wishes of the client is something Jim Marshall said he saw in the Sacramento probate system in the 29 years he served as a court investigator.
The corruption is to frustrate the intent of the trustor, the person who is relying on another to protect them, to protect their estate during and after their lifetime. However, not all fiduciaries are doing that.
And do you believe that corruption is happening here in the Sacramento County Probate Court now?
Yes. I think that once you amass tens of millions of dollars in your portfolio, it gives you buying power. You can use that to purchase medical services, doctors, evaluations, all kinds of things.
I began this investigation a year ago when several people reached out to us with criticism of Carolyn Young, one of the most well-known and powerful fiduciaries in Northern California. They all had similar stories and concerns about her practice, which includes her 2 children, Zach Young and Lindsay Bowman, who are also fiduciaries in the family business. And as our investigation progressed,
We learned this is a system-wide issue across California.
And as we've already started to show you with attorneys, one of the patterns we've encountered is the same professionals being involved in conservatorship cases over and over. But we also found a pattern of the same medical providers. It's also one of the patterns found in multiple books and studies on conservatorship abuse. Changing medical providers is something Richard Calhoun, the co-founder of the Coalition for Elder and Disability Rights, says is common and concerning in conservatorships.
Why is it that they're going to a doctor that has never seen this person before? Why aren't they going to their family physician when they have a family physician? Those are the questions that really should be being asked.
Doctors evaluate the elder's capacity. A key in the conservatorship process is permanent conservatorships aren't fully granted in court until it's proof that the elder cannot care for themselves.
My mother was a remarkable woman. She had a zest for life and she had no fear. She traveled the world on her own.
After an anonymous call was made to Adult Protective Services saying Mary Jane Mann was at risk of abuse from one of her daughters, Carol Kelly, she was placed under a temporary conservatorship of Carolyn Young after Young filed a petition in November of 2006.
She was fully competent. She went through the driver safety office and then take a behind the wheel test. She passed with 100%.
Records to the case provided by Kelly show Mann also underwent 3 independent evaluations from different doctors between 2007 and 2008 after the petition for conservatorship by Young had been filed.
Clinical psychologist, a clinical neurologist, her own physician. She was not only average, she was way above for her age. Young did not want to accept those findings. She would say, well, we need to have her evaluated by somebody that we select.
According to court documents filed in 2008, Mann's other daughter, Carol's sister, appeared to be in favor of the conservatorship and wanted another evaluation done, specifically requesting the evaluation be done by one doctor we found who has worked with Young in at least 4 cases. Carol said her mother refused to have another evaluation done in 2008.
It would be in their interest if she had dementia.
Young responded in part saying there's no basis in fact for Kelly's opinion and called it insulting to infer that this highly respected psychiatrist would make a determination of incapacity for Young's financial benefit.
They won't let me in. And I'm saying, I want to see my mom, and my mom's crying. I want to see my daughter. I want to see my daughter. I mean, it was so heartbreaking.
The doctor can also play a role in how often a family gets to see the person who's under a conservatorship.
Mom, it's Julie.
Last episode, we introduced you to Julie Doherty and her family's visitation schedule with their mother. It was a similar story for Catherine. Both had visitation enforced following the recommendation of a medical professional. Court documents show a nurse who had worked with Young in at least 3 cases was used to evaluate Catherine's mother.
They were trying to say that I was presenting a tense environment for my mother.
Neighbors of the family who had known them for over 30 years wrote a letter to the court saying they found the allegations of abuse unfounded and false, noting Catherine and her mother's relationship had always been loving. But following the evaluation, visitation was enforced.
An hour a day.
Catherine wasn't okay with limited access to her mother.
And so my last days with my mom were fought in court.
Isolation is a pattern found in multiple studies, including those conducted by the Government Accountability Office and National Center for State Courts. The latter found some persons under conservatorships were isolated from their families and neglected.
From what I've seen, the very best way to keep those billable hours running up is to isolate the conservatee. Because if your mom is taken away and you're not even allowed to see her, you are going to keep fighting and fighting and fighting with everything you have, down to your last penny, trying to get to see your mom and trying to protect your mom.
When we asked Young about visitation, she said the health and safety of her clients are her primary concern and that she follows the recommendations of doctors and court orders. Conservators have the ability to determine where their conservatees live and who takes care of them. A pattern we found in documents from the Professional Fiduciary Bureau was multiple fiduciaries hiring people that would benefit from these services themselves, not the client. These documents reveal fiduciary Michael Patrick Cunningham hired his future son-in-law as caregiver, but wrote in the agreement that the son-in-law would not pick up the client if they fell or help in any medical capacity. Fiduciary Donna Kell here in Sacramento did not hire a licensed agency to provide care, but instead hired her brother and office staff member, both of whom had no previous caregiving or companion training. Professional caregivers also benefit from this $13 billion industry. It's something Jim attests to.
After I finished my stint as a probate investigator, I opened up care homes, and my relationship with Carolyn was very beneficial to my business growing. Carolyn's proportionally was probably 70% of the clients there.
But Jim said he saw some concerns arise around certain actions.
Where it got tricky was that Carolyn wanted us to have our employees oversee the conversations with a daughter that was allegedly creating problems.
We asked Young about instructing employees to monitor family member visits. Young responded saying in her 35 years as a professional fiduciary, this has occurred only once, noting it was the result of a court order. Monitored visitation can lead to another pattern, depletion of estate.
My mother had to pay to see her own children.
Caregiving expenses are pricey by themselves, but when you add on costs like monitoring, it adds up.
According to Carolyn Young's letter from 4 years ago, it stated that everyone's visits, including neighbors and friends, would have to be supervised and monitored. And then my mother's estate would have to pay for that.
Which also created more isolation. Jim says when he expressed unease about the stewardship of Carolyn M. Young Fiduciary Services, it was the beginning of the end of his business.
The gloves were off. If they brought me in, they can take me out.
It's going to be okay. That's somebody else's fiduciary. You've got a good fiduciary, so don't you worry about it, okay? She'll be leaving.
Jim says Young gave 30 days notice and then pulled all of her conservatees out of Jim's home 10 days before Christmas.
To see them shuffling out, the confusion and the disorientation. Why are we leaving? Why do we have to go?
Okay. Let me introduce you to Carolyn Young, and they're the folks that are here to move all of these people before Christmas.
Young responded in part saying she removed her clients for their safety after she became aware that Jim had serious financial issues. She said shortly thereafter, Jim filed for bankruptcy. But Jim says it was the removal of Young's clients that caused him to close his doors, then file for bankruptcy 2 weeks later.
If I had known that I would see the consequences of these people being marched out, I wouldn't have raised it. I would have stayed in line. I can't get rid of those images of the true victims that suffered.
I think that a red flag for a conservator is someone who somehow feels that once they're in control of this person, that they're in total control.
But the other red flag for Hackard is the conservator disappearing.
I can think of many times that people finally say, I'm going to go to that conservator's office since they won't return my call.
Difficulty in reaching fiduciaries is named in studies and found in court documents from the Professional Fiduciary Bureau, including filings about fiduciary Ronald Bradley Oland, whose license was revoked, saying they were hard to reach and had a full mailbox. It was something Gabe Myers experienced as a client to fiduciary Akel.
When we first hired her, issues began to arise. The ability for me to make contact with her became extremely strained.
Documents from the Professional Fiduciary Bureau reveal Akel failed to maintain a system of checks and balances, as well as failed to pay several bills for a client. We reached out to Akel. She declined to answer our questions. Being unable to reach fiduciary Young is something that haunts Jamie.
So the next day I went to see him at the care home, and they said, well, he was in the hospital last night. I said, oh my God, nobody even let me know anything.
But she says when she called Young to discuss his health,
kept calling her, and I couldn't get a hold of her.
And when her dad's condition worsened,
the doctor, he said, I'm going to put the breathing machine on. And I said, please don't do that.
Jamie says her father didn't want life support.
And he said, do you have the authority to tell me that? And the legal authority to tell me that? And I said, I don't think so. So he did it.
After Young took over as conservator, Jamie didn't know what power she still had.
Because I was under the impression she had it. That's what I was led to believe very strongly. You don't have nothing to say about your dad now.
Young responded in part saying there's no factual basis for Miss Lambourne's accusation and that Young's attorney advised her the decision was left to Jamie. But Jamie says that wasn't made aware to her.
Made me cry. I said, why didn't somebody tell me about that? I was just so upset. I was so upset.